This video is in part a response to a debate between Cosmic Skeptic and Peter Singer. If you have not seen that debate, don't worry. You don't need to watch it to understand the video I'm presenting right now, which is about philosophy, politics, and ethics. Peter Singer and Cosmic Skeptic spend their whole debate dancing around the question of objective morality. Do our ethical values exist as objective facts? Are they objective values that can be measured in the same way that weight can be measured? Some things are heavier than others, and the number, in a sense, that we assign to weight is something that objectively exists in the real world. No. Why are we even having the conversation in the first place? It's a great discussion. Well, all right. The reason why we're having the conversation in the first place is that there is a widespread misconception that if we admit something to be merely subjective, it is therefore unreal or less real than an objective judgment and objective value, right? So weight, we're going to agree, is objective. There's an objective measurement of weight. Doesn't matter if you use pounds or kilograms, but weight is objectively real. If you have a painting, how much does the painting weigh? It's objectively real. How much money is that painting worth? It's a subjective evaluation. So we call together 1,000 people. We have 1,000 people, and we say, we're going to have an auction. Whoever bids the most, whoever offers to pay the most money, they don't just get to buy the painting, they actually determine the value of the painting. What is the price of the painting? What is this painting worth? It's established by an auction. That's very common in the art world, in case you didn't know. It's not the only way to establish the value of a painting. So, okay, we've got 1,000 people here. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to have a silent auction. Everyone's going to write down on a piece of paper what they would be willing to pay for this painting, and they're going to put that piece of paper in a ballot box. It's more like voting. Now guess what? Surprise! We decided not to sell the painting to the highest bidder. We took an average of all the votes. We took an average of what you each wrote down and said this painting was worth, and we decided that that is a reasonable price for this painting. You can do it. Right? Is there a sense in which one price is real and the other price is false? Nope. Is there a sense in which the price assigned to the painting can ever be objectively real in the sense that weight is objectively real? Nope. What are you really measuring with the price in either case? If you did the auction at two different times, just 6 months apart, the value of the painting would be different because the people who attend the auction would be different. If you had the auction in New York City or you had the auction in Paris, France for the same painting, the value of the painting would be different. Why? Because ultimately it's subjective, and that's okay. Subjective does not mean unreal. Subjective does not mean we can compare it to something else that objectively exists and is real. Now, once in a while, this sort of thing matters, okay? What if the painting is made out of solid gold? Okay, now we have a question. What if the price being paid for this painting is so cheap that if you melted it down, the gold that it's made out of would be worth more than the painting? Okay, now the weight of the painting matters. Now I might ask the question, how much does that painting weigh? Because I may not be interested in its artistic value. I may be interested in melting it down to get the solid gold. Okay, there are exceptions to the rule. But my general point is here, to come to the conclusion that something is subjective does not mean it's unreal, and does not mean that the subjective value, the subjective evaluation, is less important than any possible or actual objective evaluation. So that's why we're having this discussion in the first place. And where does Peter Singer take it? Where does this half-wit genius Peter Singer, this moron who has dragged the name of veganism through the mud for so many days, where does he take it? Oh, Cosmic Skeptic challenges him, saying, okay, when you use the adjective good, what do you really mean? Do you just mean good for you? Do you just mean more pleasurable for yourself or more pleasant for yourself? And Peter Singer says, no. When he uses the adjective good, he means good in a sense that exists absolutely. In a sense that exists that's objectively real. For whom is something good if it's objectively real? Here's Peter Singer's answer. This is an old man with decades in philosophy and a stack of publications on the bookshelf. He says that something is objectively good, is objectively pleasurable, if it is pleasurable for the whole universe. If it's good for the whole universe. If the universe would be better off with more of it, then it's good. That is an answer just as crude and just as stupid as saying if it's good for God, if it's good for Moses, if it's good for Zeus, if it's good for Indra, then it's objectively good. All you're doing is appealing to an abstract sock puppet, an abstract hand puppet, shall we say, that is a stand-in for your own judgment. When Peter Singer says that something is good for the whole universe, what he means is it's good in his opinion. It's his judgment, but he's holding up this puppet here and saying, oh, no, it's not my opinion. It's the universe's opinion. It's Indra's opinion. It's Zeus's opinion. I have this friend who's some kind of abstraction, and according to him, there's a difference between good and evil. Doesn't have to do with me. According to him, there's a difference in terms of pleasure, in terms of what an objectively real person would consider pleasure versus pain, or the sum total of all people's pleasure. It's not me making the judgment, it's him. All you're doing is disassociating your own act of judgment from yourself and pointing to it as something more objectively real than you are. Okay? And that's just as absurd as saying that the value of the painting consists in its weight. It's not all that interesting to talk about how unreal moral and ethical values are. It's a very simple, short point to make. And I'll use an allegory here. It's not related, but you'll see why I use it in the fullness of time. It's not that interesting to just kind of prove to somebody that killing a calf and then keeping the calf's mother in captivity so that human beings can drink the milk, that's kind of bad and evil and disgusting. That's really simple. That's a really short, easy thing to prove. What's more interesting and more philosophically weighty and provocative and important for us to deal with is, hey, wait a minute. How did we end up living in a society where everyone agrees that killing a calf and keeping its mother in captivity and humans drinking the milk, that's normal? That it's neither good nor evil, that we don't even make the judgment? That the judgment has already been made for us, that's good and normal and there's nothing wrong with it and there's nothing even to question. That's philosophically weighty. Okay? Now, in the same sense, I'm not that interested here in just hounding on the point that ethical judgments are subjective. Of course they are. The value of the painting is subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. How much you're willing to pay is subjective. On and on it goes, right? What's more interesting to examine is, how is it that we live in a world where the majority of people, the majority of the time, live as if ethical and moral values are objectively real, where that's normal. It's as normal as people drinking cow milk. And I'm going to answer that question. I think it's more useful, and I think it illustrates the underlying simpler question about the subjectiveness of moral and ethical judgments. You have a bunch of people who come together to play baseball on a professional diamond, a professional baseball field. Okay, so you know there are seats, there are lights, there are clear white lines painted around the field. There's a picture. You know the features of this field. All these people have many years of experience with the rules. They come to play baseball. They all have a common sense of fair play. They have a common sense of what is cheating and what is not cheating. They have a common sense of what's reasonable or unreasonable, even when there's a problem that may fall into a gray area outside of the rules, or, for example, a situation where the umpire wasn't paying attention and you have to come to some kind of reasonable accommodation. There's an ethos, there's an ethical system to baseball that all the participants are subscribing to. It includes even things like under what circumstances should the batter run up and try to punch the pitcher. I kid you not, at least back in the 1980s, that was a thing. If the pitcher violated certain rules of decorum and ethics, then it was considered acceptable for the batter to run up at the pitcher's mound and try to punch out the pitcher. It was all part of the game, okay? So it's possible for the players in the game, for the sake of the love of the game, to all participate in the same set of subjective moral standards to such an extent that those moral standards, shared by many people, being obeyed by many people, and even being obeyed by people where it's to their own personal disadvantage, but for the love of the sport, for the love of the game, they do it. That gives the pleasing illusion to all of the participants that these ethical standards are objectively real. Okay. And many of us live our lives that way much of the time. But let's say I gather together a group of people to play baseball under slightly different circumstances. There is no baseball diamond. There is no first base, no third base. There's no stadium. We're on a camping trip. And I say, hey guys, the 20 of us, we're going to get together and we're going to play baseball in this grassy field. Now we start to get some philosophical questions. What is the difference between a home run and a foul ball? Back when we were in the stadium, there was a clearly drawn white line. Now we just have a grassy field and there is no white line. We're going to have to decide in a creative and dynamic sense, what is the difference between a foul ball and a hit, fair play in the outfield, and a home run? We're going to have to say, okay, you know what? There's a tree over there and there's a rock. Maybe we're going to have to run around in the forest and get some twigs, get some branches, and lay them out to mark some of the features. We are going to have to decide amongst ourselves. There is no objectively real line out in that grassy field for us to be discovered. It's not as if there's a difference between the true demarcation and a false or misleading demarcation. There is no line to be known accurately or inaccurately. There's only a role for ourselves as creative individuals and ourselves coming together in a democratic or cooperative way to decide where we are going to draw the line. And those are the lines that decide our entire political discourse. What is the difference between a free person and a slave? After the American Civil War, nobody wanted to deal with it. They just had this incredibly vague principle that you have to, quote-unquote, enjoy the fruits of your own labor. So, well, guess what? A whole lot of forms of labor contracts that came after the American Civil War looked exactly the same as slavery. It's like, well, gee, it looks like the difference between slavery and freedom. You guys didn't really flesh out this concept enough. What age is appropriate to allow a human being to drive a car? At what age is it legally, morally, or ethically appropriate to trust you to rent a car, maybe accidentally kill somebody, maybe just accidentally have an accident and smash up the car? Is an 18-year-old competent, responsible, ethically, to rent a car? Is a 16-year-old? Is a 15-year-old? Is a 14-year-old? Do you want to live in a society where 8-year-old kids can rent and drive cars? 12-year-old kids? Okay, if you've been in some third world countries, you probably have been in countries where I have been, where there were 10-year-olds, 9-year-olds driving cars and motorbikes around, trucks too. I'm not joking, it really exists. You can live in a society like that. Okay. What is more of a problem? 11-year-olds driving cars or drunken elderly people driving cars? Good question. All right. Those are lines that we draw. We draw them in a creative way, ex nihilo. Our role is creative. What is the difference between a rose and a dandelion? There is nothing intrinsic that distinguishes a flower from a weed. We can decide dandelions should be eradicated and we should only grow roses. But we can also bring people together and decide to have a contest at the county fair for who can grow the most beautiful bunch of dandelions instead of the most beautiful bunch of roses. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. These are lines that we draw. And you can draw them as a creative artist, as an author, as a philosopher, as a political commentator, as someone engaged in analysis of what's wrong with your society. And above all else, you can draw those lines dynamically in the course of being a leader of public opinion, a politician, someone in some kind of democratic creative process trying to make the world a better place. And for me, the most depressing and most boring thing about Peter Singer of all The most boring thing about this discussion between Peter Singer and Cosmic Skeptic is that there seems to be no tendency towards drawing conclusions that are actionable, that have to do with getting out in the real world, drawing those lines, and getting people motivated to question the assumptions that they were born into. Because we're all in a situation in the 21st century of having the luxury of playing baseball on a professional field. We're all in the situation of not having to question, where should the line be drawn? What is the difference between a foul ball and a home run? Because the lines have been drawn for us, and it's so comfortable to conform. It's so easy to just get along and play the game by the rules that are already there, and to not question to what extent this line, it's drawn by me now. I'm agreeing to it, or I'm going to fight to redraw it in another place where for some reason it's more or less fair. It's so easy to go to the grocery store and just accept that there's a packaged product there on the shelf, cow milk, and not question, hey, you know what? There is neither good nor evil, but thinking makes it so. Nobody else draws the line between good and evil but me. It's not Moses, it's not Indra, it's not, Thor, it's not the Judeo-Christian God. Nobody draws the line but me. But hey, you know what? If I'm going to witness the reality of where cow milk comes from, of what it really means to produce this, the ethical consequences, the ecological consequences, I have to decide for myself where to draw the line. Nobody ultimately is responsible but me. If we have more people taking that analytical, incisive, and ultimately nihilistic attitude, saying, I am the creator and I'm the arbiter of these ethical values. I'm the one who has to come up with a way to entertain 20 people with just one wooden bat and one ball, okay? And I've got to motivate everyone to see what I see. I've got to motivate these people to look out at an empty grass field with just a tree and a rock and say, there's the line. That's where we're going to draw the line, and now we're going to play ball. That's the challenge, ultimately, of motivating a group of people as activists to go to the government and say, no, we need seatbelts. No, we need speed limits. And there's no objectively real speed limit. What the speed limit should be, how high or how low, we're going to decide right now. We're going to come together, we're going to debate it, and we're going to draw a line. We're going to draw a line between good and evil, and we're going to punish with fines and prison sentences people who are on the wrong side of that line. Our whole society is so comfortable with going to the corner store and seeing that milk as a final packaged product. It's the greatest ethical tragedy of our time, and it passes unseen before our eyes 365 days per year.